Am I appropriately sinister? I would apologize for that accent, but I think it's just as good as Picard's. Alright, interwebs, it's time for my review of Star Trek Picard, Episode 5, Stardust City Rag. So, spoiler-free review up front. I've got to say, I am already fully 100% aware that this is going to be the most controversial episode of Star Trek Picard. It did a lot of things. Some of them right in the very first scene that are going to be very, very contentious for some fans. Like I said, I'm keeping this spoiler-free for right now, but we'll talk about all of it in a second. But, yeah. I have to say, for me personally, because, he came here for my opinion, I really, really liked this episode. There are some avenues that they take certain characters down in this episode. One in particular, I'll just say, they take Seven down a particular character path that initially I was not 100% sure how I thought about it, but having sat with it for a few minutes since watching the episode, I think it's going to be a really strong story for her, especially if they are able to pay it off by the end of the season in a strong way. And I really think that they'll be able to pay off this character arc really well. Judging by how they've set it up in this episode and how strongly and poignantly they've set up her character arc in this episode, I really think that as long as they pay off the brilliant arc that they've started with her character here, I think that they can do some really, really wonderful things and beautiful things with her character at the end. But I also know that, like I said, it's going to be contentious. I already know there's going to be a lot of people that will have a lot of problems with this character's development, Seven's development. And I have to say, as someone who Seven is probably one of, if not my favorite Star Trek character, besides maybe Dax, Jessie and Ezri Dax, and catch me on a different day, and I'll probably even say Seven is my favorite character. I very much liked what I saw, and I am very optimistic for how they're going to handle it. Now, that may not mean they may not stick the landing, but if they do, I think it has the potential to be one of the best arcs in all of Star Trek, to sort of bring her from where she was in Voyager all the way to the end of where I hope they're going to bring her by the end of the season. As for everything else in this episode, besides the kind of contentious stuff that may be happening around 7 of 9, I thought everything else was absolutely fantastic. There's some great development and movement of the plot forward here. We got some surprise reveals. The plot actually feels like it's moving ahead at a very fast pace now, finally. But we also got time for some really enjoyable, fun character moments. Like, every character in this episode got some time to shine, got time to show off themselves in a little way. Some more than others, for sure. But every character got a little bit, and it was all a lot of fun just to see them bouncing off of each other, interacting, having fun. This episode was just a lot of fun in a lot of ways, which is surprising considering that I think that this episode also had some of the most darkest drama, especially darkest drama with characters that we've all come to love in Star Trek. Like, this episode went to some places. So it's really surprising to say that it's also the funniest episode that this show has definitely done, and maybe the funniest episode I've seen in Star Trek in a long time, if not ever. I could have to sit down and look at all the comedic episodes of Star Trek. Maybe Trials and Tribulations, obviously, comes to mind as a better comedic episode. But this is definitely up there for funniest and most fun Star Trek episodes. It's like a heist episode of Star Trek, which I don't think we've ever really seen in Star Trek, or maybe only here and there. So this episode was just so much fun, yet brought us to some really great depths of character pathos and drama, and really showed that the characters really understand all their new characters, as well as know how to handle all the legacy characters as well. It was just a beautiful balance of everything that I wanted in the series. New, old, fun, drama. It was just a weird but perfect amalgam in my mind of all these disparate elements. And while I do have some concerns and some problems here and there that I'll bring up in my main review, I really think that this was a phenomenal episode of Star Trek Picard and Star Trek in general. All right, so that's it for my spoiler-free review. We're going to get into the actual discussion of the episode here. So if you haven't seen the episode, stop here. Also, some quick housekeeping stuff really quickly. One, if you're interested, I did a review of the Star Trek Picard novel that just came out earlier this week. So if you're curious about that, please check that out right up here. Should be there, I believe, is where the little link will go. So check that out. I'm really kind of proud of it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about the novel. It does have a spoiler-free section, so if you haven't read it, you can still engage in the discussion and learn a little bit about the novel. Second of all, my roommate, who is one of the nicest, kindest human beings that I have ever had the fortune to meet, is currently doing a GoFundMe campaign to help him get his stuff from Oklahoma to Los Angeles, where I live. He does not have a lot of money, and he needs help just sort of being able to move across the country and get his stuff here, and he's kind of not been able to get his stuff for several years now. So it honestly really means a lot to him to be able to move across the country. So if you have any bucks to give, any coins to toss your Witcher, please consider giving to his GoFundMe. It should be down in the down below. So please, if you have a few bucks or anything, like even if it's like $1 or $2, send it his way. It would be really meaningful to him and really meaningful to me as his roommate. So just calling it out. Don't feel obligated in any way, shape, or form, but I just figured I'd shoot that out there to my wonderful and amazing audience out there. Okay, so let's actually get into the review discussion. Normally I have my notes, but I already know exactly how I'm going to start off talking about this review. So, first things first, they murdered Icheb. Whew! And it was pretty dang gruesome, and it was clear it was they fridged Icheb, which, if you don't know what fridge means, it means killing off a character in order to support the emotional arc of another character. So they killed Icheb in order to give 7 of 9 this really revenge arc. And it definitely works powerfully. Like, it definitely makes us feel her need to want to get revenge, killing off a character that we've come to know and love on screen. And it was super effective. As soon as I realized that was Icheb, I was like, no, they're not. I was honestly a bit gutted, because I really loved 7 of 9 and Icheb's relationship, and you really felt when 7 of 9 shoots Icheb. You really felt that moment. Any Star Trek Voyager fan probably felt that moment in that scene, and Jeri Ryan sells it super well. Throughout this whole episode, Jeri Ryan just did a fantastic job. I'll talk about her performance a little bit more in just a second in another scene. It was just a really powerful scene, but I know that is going to be incredibly contentious for a lot of the audience out there. Especially killing off a character that we had this whole arc and came to know and love on Voyager. To know that it ends this way in such a gruesome manner is a bit rough, especially for Star Trek. And so I know that it's going to be hard for a lot of people. It was hard for me, honestly, to see a character like that die like that, a character that I really liked. However, I do think that what it enabled them to tell with 7 and make us feel with 7 later on in the episode, I think it makes it pay off well and makes us really understand 7's motivation later on in the episode. So I think if they were going to do this route, they did it well, and they justified it. But I know that it might be tough for a lot of people out there. For me, it worked. It did exactly what it needed to. It made me really feel hurt in that moment, feel 7's pain. But I understand if it was a bridge too far for some people. But for me, I thought it worked really well in conveying the real anguish of this moment. And now I actually need my notes because I forgot the rest of the episode, but I knew I was going to talk about Icheb, so give me a second. Okay, then we get to Freecloud, and we get our first glimpse of Maddox. It's 2 weeks previous to this episode. He's on the run from the Tal Shiar. He meets up with Bjayzl. I think that Bjayzl sounds like it's a reference to something. I feel like it's something in mythology. They've been doing a lot of mythological references, like with the Fenris Rangers and things like that, and Romulus and Remus, obviously. Don't have time to look that up before this, but I'm curious if anyone out there knows what Bjayzl is in reference to and how it might fit in mythologically or thematically with the show. But anyways, Maddox meets up with Bjayzl, and she betrays him, and she is going to sell him out to the Tal Shiar. The one thing I'll say about the scene, I mean, it's just clearly just set up, and I mean, the only really surprising thing is that we see Maddox for the first time, and I'll say this about both Maddox and Ichib. I don't know, I don't have the necessary time to check, and I don't think IMDb updated quick enough. I don't think either of those two are played by the original actors, and both of those actors are definitely around, and in the case of Ichib's actor, I definitely know that the actor was, like, petitioning to play Ichib again in Star Trek Picard, so if it wasn't actually played by him, I'm curious to to see his reaction to the fact that he was not asked to come back. Now, I can't check for sure, so I'm not going to rant too much about it, but I don't think either character is played by the original actor, which is, you know, whatever. I mean, they're essentially here for one episode. If they were here for longer, I would have a bit more of a problem with it. But the fact that they're here for just an episode, each of them, I think it's fine. But a little bit disappointing. It would have been nice to have those actors back, but by no means am I that upset about it. I'm sure other people will be bothered, but Star Trek's done that before. Many franchises have done that before, recast characters. So they did it well by giving Maddox a beard to at least hide the fact that he was played by a different actor. But you could definitely see that it was, I definitely think it was a different actor. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think so. Then we get on the holodeck, and we have a wonderful scene between Picard and Seven of Nine, where Picard sort of lays out the fact that he has problems with Seven of Nine being a vigilante ranger. While he respects them, he does have a problem with them being rangers. And Seven kind of pushes back, says like, well, they may be imperfect, but we're doing better than just giving up, sort of a jab at Picard. It was a wonderful sort of contentious scene between these two actors, and sort of setting up their dynamic going forward, that they respect each other, but they don't necessarily have most love for each other. And this is where I'll talk about Jeri Ryan. Jeri Ryan nails playing Seven here. You definitely get the sense, what I really loved is you get the sense that she has definitely grown as a person. She definitely comes across as more human than she was at the end of Voyager, but you still sense a little bit of stiffness to her. She's not like, hey, fully like, you know, I'm all cool and open. She's definitely more present. She's definitely more able to articulate and emote and kind of come back into herself, but she's definitely still got a little bit of aloofness to her in her performance, and it's such a fine line to toe, and I think Jeri Ryan just does it absolutely superbly. She does a phenomenal job sort of showing a Seven of Nine that has grown but still feels recognizably Seven, and just a wonderful job on that front from Jeri Ryan here. Voice cracking. Then we get a short little scene between Rios and Raffi, which serves to give us a reminder that both Picard and Seven used to be ex-Borg, and also flesh out Rios and Raffi having a prior relationship, showing that they were friends and kind of joking around with each other. Didn't have too much to say about it. It's a wonderful, sweet scene that also served the purpose of giving us some exposition, but also giving us a feeling of how these two characters know each other and interact with each other, so a well-done, fun little scene there. Then we also get a scene with Jurati and Maddox, kind of having a little love video that Jurati's watching and getting upset about. This is something that was shown in the Star Trek Picard novel. If you haven't read the Star Trek Picard novel, The Last Best Hope, I highly recommend it. Go check out my review, as I stated before. Not surprised that it was brought up here, though I was surprised where it eventually goes at the end of the episode. But it was sort of like establishing that relationship for those of us who had not read the novel. Okay, so then we get them coming into Freecloud, and I gotta say, I really adored all the different ads that all the characters got, and all the interactions allowed each of them to have, like Raffi kind of shoving away the like Venom advertisement, sort of showing she's trying to stay clean. You get Jurati kind of like hiding from the punching thing, and then like her like playing with Rios afterwards. It was just like, it was a lot of fun to like see each character get like a little beat through the different advertisements that they got. It was a clever little way to like show what Freecloud is and kind of give us this taste of Freecloud, but also again building out character dynamics and building out these characters within themselves and showing us what type of people they are. This show is just, you know, I've said it over and over again, but this show has just done a wonderful job at able to marry beautiful character moments, like small beats of character within the larger narrative of the show. Just repeatedly, we get little pieces that show who these characters are in such small ways, yet reveal everything about them. Like I said, Raffi tossing away the Venom ad shows that she's really trying to focus on being clean in this moment, which sets up her character for later on in the episode. And it's such a small beat, it makes sense to show us what Freecloud is like, but it also shows us what she's going through in that moment. It's just really beautiful and subtle and fantastic writing that really makes me feel like every time I'm going to watch these episodes, I'm going to find something a little bit more and just really enrich each and every viewing of these episodes. So just, I cannot praise the writers of Star Trek Picard enough for those small moments. Then we also get the fact that Seven of Nine hears Bjayzel's name, who we kind of got hints at the beginning of the episode if you didn't catch in the Each of Death scene that we heard Bjayzel's name there. So we kind of, if you had caught that, you would know that Seven has a prior relationship with Bjayzel and may want revenge, so wouldn't be surprised later on in the episode. But we get this thing planned where Seven says she's going to trade with Bjayzel herself for Maddox, and then we get the setup of the plan. Then we get the amazing setup of the heist scene, and I adored everything about this 5-10 minute sequence. Everything in this scene was just wonderful. The first thing, I really loved the cross-cutting where we cut to Freecloud and we cut back to Raffi kind of giving the plan, and we get the sense of Raffi knows what she's doing. She is a very smart tactical officer. Again, it's showing us her character. It's showing us that she is someone who knows how to sneak into things, can play off of each other. And I just love how again, in this scene, every character gets a little time to shine. I loved Rios just kind of trying to get into the music when he's down in the club because he's trying not to be sort of aloof. He's trying to play it up a little bit. It was just sort of fun kind of see him get out of his shell. It was really kind of playing off his character, showing us who he is by showing us who he isn't. So it was just a lot of fun, with the feather in his cap. Picard doing his horrible French accent is absolutely hysterical, but him just getting full into it makes sense for Picard. Picard's always been someone who's adored acting and loved being an actor. So it was just fun to see him go full bore into being a sort of French pirate, as it were. It was just a ton of fun. Elnor getting this moment where he takes him so long to get oh, we're lying, which just shows that he just doesn't get what lies are because of his life in absolute candor with the nuns. So the fact that he just it takes him so long to get it, and then he's kind of overjoyed when he's it clicks for him, which is just so much fun. It was just, all these dynamics are great. And then Jeri getting anxious, oh, I have to do a thing and I don't know if I can do that, and she has the barest minimum of stuff to do. She just has to activate a transporter. It was just all really fun dynamics. And then Rios getting drugged when he talks to the alien, which, by the way, that reptilian alien, I know it's not the same species, but it reminds me of the aliens from the Star Trek Enterprise season 4 premiere, the Nazi alien people. Just they kind of looked very similar. This guy just looked a little bit beefier. So I think they're different aliens. I'm pretty sure they're different aliens, but it just reminded me of that same sort of design. But it was just everything about this heist sequence was just a ton of fun. Seven of Nine say you need a feather in your cap, and then it cuts to Rios with the feather in his cap. It was just so much fun. Oh, we also get a Quark name drop in that scene, so we know Quark is still kicking around doing his old quirky, nefarious businessman stuff. That felt like an Easter egg that worked, though it does give the sense Quark's the only nefarious businessman in the entire quadrant. But I did like the name drop. It felt well utilized there. Then we get a nice tender scene between Raffi and Picard. It was just a sweet little scene to show Raffi's going to go off and do her own thing now. She's just saying goodbye. And I kind of figured she'd be back by the end of the episode, but it was nice to sort of see her starting to warm up to yeah, it felt like I was back in it again. It was, again, a nice small character beat. Then we get Raffi going down to meet her son. Again, this is something that was echoed in the Star Trek Picard book. So if you had bought the book, you kind of already knew she had a son who she had abandoned and felt guilty about. And it was just nice to see her trying to reach out to him, and actually, we do believe her. We do see that she's grown, but she can't let go of this conspiracy. And, we learn, again, by the end of the episode, that she probably is not wrong about it. But the fact that she feels such guilt at having left her son, and him just throwing it in her face, it was just, again, this is what I'm talking about, going from such fun to the depths of drama. The scene with Raffi and her kid was just painful. It was really just hard to watch, because he does not give her any quarter, and you see the pain on her face. Wonderful job by the actress who plays Raffi. She did a phenomenal job in that scene. Okay, so then we get to the actual rendezvous scene between Picard trying to sell Seven to Bjayzel, and then Seven revealing that she wants to get revenge on Bjayzel for killing Icheb. A lot of things going on in the scene. One thing in particular that I want to really kind of talk about briefly that somewhat bothers me a little bit, but generally I loved the scene. It was nice to sort of see the flip side of things. Picard playing it up again, being the French actor, just having a lot of fun in that role, worked really well. Elnor kind of saying at the end, oh, are we done acting? And Picard said, yeah, I think everyone's finally showing who they really are. Just a wonderful play with all of those characters and sort of Seven revealing things. The one thing I want to talk about the scene, it kind of plays out through the whole episode, but I'll talk about it here because I don't want to end on something that's somewhat negative. This episode really hints between a romantic relationship, or at least some sort of physical, sexual, romantic relationship between Seven and Bjayzel. Which would be great. I totally would read Seven as either lesbian or, I mean, obviously she was with Chakotay at the end of Star Trek Voyager, so bisexual in some sense. That totally reads to me. It would totally make sense that she would kind of be like, I don't care what gender you are, I'll be with anybody. That fits for her character. What I'm a bit frustrated on is the fact that they hint at it so much. I mean, it's very clear. But Jazel basically says, like, hey, we had a very, very close relationship. And it just kind of frustrates me that they don't just outright say it. They don't just, like, I mean, I know they shouldn't say, like, well, you and I slept together that one time. So I get it would be a little bit forced to just somewhat state it. But I feel like, I don't know, I guess I just get frustrated when it's clearly, like, queer coding characters. It's clearly there. It's being said without being said. Like, you get right up to the line without actually saying it. Like, Seven could have said, like, I don't know. You could have done something that made it a little bit more explicit. I don't know. I don't want to hang up too much on this because I'm sure people in the comments will disagree with me heavily, and I totally love the idea that Seven is basically canonically bisexual at this point now. But I don't know. I just get frustrated when you get queer representation, but you don't get queer representation. When we queer code characters, we just don't confirm it, so they have that plausible deniability if they want to say, well, 7 of 9 really wasn't gay. Well, we didn't say that. It just feels like them kind of like trying to play it safe, which, Star Trek shouldn't play it safe in that aspect. That's what Star Trek's about. It should show these things explicitly. I mean, and besides, the franchise has already done queer relationships in Discovery. So, I mean, I don't see what the issue would have been. So it's a little bit frustrating. Maybe it'll be fleshed out later in the season. I'm not going to harp on it too much more, but it was just something that I felt a little bit frustrated on it, but I also felt elated by it. So, I felt great by the fact that we were getting a bisexual 7, but a little bit frustrated, but it wasn't as clear as it could have been, so there's a little bit of plausible deniability. That's where I'll leave it. I'm sure there's more I can say on it at some point later, but that's where I'll kind of leave that thought for now. The ending of the scene I really, really liked, though. The fact that Picard was able to talk Seven out of killing Bjayzl by appealing to her humanity, saying, don't let the fact that the Borg, took humanity means that you can't get it back. I think his line is like, don't squander your humanity. Such a beautiful line and such a beautiful way to like connect to Picard in that moment. It was just really great character beat for the both of them. And Picard just trying so hard to believe in Seven and wanting Seven to not do the bad thing, to get revenge, to seek justice rather than revenge. It was a good job. And I also like the fact that Rios was the one who actually talked Seven down. It wasn't really Picard, but Rios kind of spoke to her pragmatic side. Instead of, Picard's appeal to emotion, it was Rios's appeal to her pragmatic side, which speaks to Seven. Seven's always been like a pragmatist in a lot of ways. So the fact that Rios and Picard both kind of appealing were the things that talked her down in that moment. And I also liked the fact that Seven feels guilt at having Icheb die. The fact that she was the one that told Bjayzl about Icheb, and that's what led to Icheb being taken. It really leads to an even greater sense of the tragedy of Icheb's death, and at least made it feel a little bit more warranted. And like I said, I know people will find Icheb's death contentious, but the fact that they at least pay it off a little bit more here and kind of flesh it out and why it happened and why Seven feels so guilty about it, I think, again, it goes to me being more understanding of them choosing to go down that route and making it feel justified in my mind, even though it is essentially fridging a character that we really loved. Even more pathos to Seven by killing Icheb. It was just, well, if they're going to do it, they're mining it for as much pathos as they possibly can, which is good drama. Then we get back up to the ship and we have a really wonderful scene between Seven and Picard again, where Picard basically asks Seven, or Seven asks Picard, do you feel like you regained all of your humanity? And Picard says, yes. She says all of it, and Picard says no, but they're both working on it. And, it's a wonderful place for both of those characters to be. It's also something that speaks to me as someone who has had friends be survivors of many different types of trauma. That feeling that they're both feeling is very typical in a lot of trauma survivors, feeling that they have to fight to be their full selves again, even having to deal with it decades in years and decades later. So it works so well with the character, but it also speaks to a larger human truth about people who have dealt with trauma and are still going through PTSD, how they feel like they still have to fight to regain their humanity. So just a wonderful beat between the two of them. And I loved how that dovetailed into the next scene where Seven beams down to the planet and murders Bjayzl. And like I said at the top, this, I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about it, Seven going down this dark route. But I feel like the arc they're setting up, because clearly Seven will be coming back. She gave Picard basically the cell phone that was in Avengers Civil War. She, call me if there's an Infinity War. So clearly Seven will be back at some point later this season. And so I'm sure that what they're setting up here is that Seven has lost a little piece of herself in these moments, a little piece of her humanity, and she will be gaining it back. Picard will be able to help her regain it by the end of the season. I really hope that that's the arc they're setting up, that Picard will be able to help Seven find herself again, find her humanity again, to bring her back into the light. And it will be nice to have two characters that are able to connect on that level of being survivors, be able to aid each other. And we're seeing the two paths that people can walk. Picard sort of being someone who still has hope despite his trauma, and Seven is someone who has lost hope because of trauma, because those are both very real reactions to trauma. And I sort of like seeing the diverging paths, and I really hope, in true Star Trek tradition, that they're able to pull Seven back. I know people will probably say, this is too dark for my Star Trek. This is too dark. They shouldn't have done this to Seven. Seven shouldn't, Seven would be a better character. That she knows better. She can do better. This is not the end of this story. There's an arc. You have to go dark before you get to the light. I know we are normally used to seeing this arc play out in a single episode. Like we would see Seven maybe do the wrong thing in an episode, and then by the end of the episode, she would have come to understand and learn her lesson. But this is a story being told over 10 episodes. So that arc is going to take more than just a single episode to resolve. So I think if they pay it off well, which I think I would be shocked if they did not pay that off by the end of the season. If they pay that off well, I think it will be a really beautiful arc to do for both of those characters. But I know some people will probably have a problem with it, and it'll probably sit uneasily with them. It sits uneasily with me, but I think that it will pay off in a really worthwhile and beautiful way. And the writers at this point, after everything I've seen the past few episodes, they have my trust in that they will be doing that with her character. So as someone who cares about Seven as a character, I am saddened to see her go down this path. But as a viewer, as a watcher, as someone who enjoys good drama, I think this is a really beautiful way to take her character, and one that will, I think, show a wonderful, wonderful arc for her character by the end of the season. Back up on the ship, we get Maddox in the sick bay, and basically it's a lot of exposition dumping sort of thing. Picard talks to Maddox about Dodge and everything like that, and Maddox basically says, there are lies upon lies, and, their Starfleet may have had, or the Federation may have had something to do with the synth attack. So kind of something that we all suspected, that there was more to that synth attack than just the Tal Shiar being involved in that. And also that's a weird thing too, that they use Tal Shiar and Vashta Narada, I forget what they're called, the secret Tal Shiar. The fact that they, and I know Vashta Narada from Doctor Who, the fact that they use them interchangeably is a bit weird. But yeah, we clearly know that the Federation or something more was up with the synthetic. So Maddox sort of giving that Picard that hint is just sort of like, yeah, we kind of figured. But it also gives Picard knowledge of where Soji is going to be, which, judging by the trailer for next episode, minor spoilers on that front, looks like it's finally going to kick the Borg artifact storyline into high gear, because that story was kind of stalling out. So I'm really glad that we didn't get any of it this episode, that there wasn't just more like, all right, treading in place stuff going on here in this episode of the Borg Cube. But it looks like next episode is finally going to set that storyline off into high gear, which I'm very, very, very excited about. Then we get a wonderful scene between Rios and Picard. Basically, Rios saying, I'll take you to the Borg artifact. And then we learn that Raffi's back on the ship, and Picard kind of feeling melancholy about the fact, happy that she's back, but clearly understanding that she's in pain. So it was again, a very subtle beat, but you could definitely read it on Patrick Stewart's performance, that he was happy she was back, but also kind of understanding that she was in pain. Very, very subtle job by Patrick Stewart there. And then we get the sort of big ending twist that, again, a lot of us had probably called. Jurati is definitely doing something nefarious, because she kills Maddox. I watched that scene, I'm like, yep, she's totally killing Maddox in the scene. I knew it as soon as the scene started, and she clearly knows more than she's letting on, as she kind of states. She says, she knows something. I wish you knew what I knew, and it also goes to explaining why she was so anxious early in the episode. Like, she was definitely anxious about something, and it wasn't just the transporters, it was the fact that she had to kill Maddox. And I like that the EMH knows, so I'm glad that we're kind of playing with the EMH a little bit, and the holograms aren't just there for character pathos, but their characters, the EMH is actually going to play a role in the story, because clearly he's going to know something and she's going to have to try and hide it, or the EMH will let Picard know. It'll be a sort of whole unraveling of that storyline somewhere in the future. So I'm curious to see where that's going to go down, but clearly Jeri has some cards up her sleeve, and I'm glad that we're getting an interesting fleshing out of her character in that way. But again, not a necessarily surprising development. And also, we get another murder of a legacy character in this episode, by the way. We get Maddox's death and Icheb's death. So two, Maddox a little less important than Icheb, obviously, but two legacy characters both kicking the bucket in this episode. So it's not looking good for legacy characters in this show. So I'm sure some people may have a problem with that as well, but I think it's a good way to heighten the drama and a good way to heighten Jeri's character, especially she's willing to kill somebody she really loves. Like, she clearly cares about Maddox, and yet she knows something so dark and sinister that it means that she's willing to kill him. So that means the stakes are pretty high at this moment. So I am very excited to see where that storyline goes down. All right, so that's it for my review of this episode. I thought it was a fantastic job. The more I talked about it in this review, the more I came to love it. I think, there's some pieces in play that, I think we need to see how they pay off, like mostly when it comes to the character of Seven, to really be able to judge it fully, the full arc of her character. But I really am trusting of the writers to pay it off well, and everything that I saw in this episode, while painting me as a fan of Seven, is making me elated in terms of a fan of drama and good storytelling. So fantastic storytelling, hurtful for me as a Seven fan, but fan for me of storytelling. That was a sentence that made sense. And a lot of great story mining here, a lot of fun, a lot of drama, and I'm also glad that they decided not to keep the Borg storyline going in this episode, that they just sort of we're just going to focus on this, let that storyline stay where it is for the moment, and then we'll get back to it next episode, so we don't have to get more spinning of the wheels pieces in this episode. So overall, just a phenomenal job, phenomenal job, and I'd love to hear what you thought about it down in the comments below. Please, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on this episode. Let me know, did you like what they did with Seven? Did you hate it? Did you hate what they did with Icheb? Did you like what they do with Icheb? I'd love to hear all of that stuff. Also, if you want to get more of my reviews and more of my discussions on Star Trek Picard, Star Trek in general, and other geek topics, give my channel subscribe. And if you want to help make these videos even better, consider giving to my Patreon. Every little bit helps me pay the bills, helps me get more equipment, helps me pay for a surgery that I have coming up in about 2 weeks at this point. So yeah, I'll be having surgery in about 2 weeks, so any bit helps on that front. But also, don't forget about possibly giving to my roommate's GoFundMe page. That'll also be down in the down below as well. So all those options are out there for you, but regardless of if you do any of them, regardless if you subscribe, give to my friend's GoFundMe, or give to my Patreon page, I'm just glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons, Stefan Schuhart, BBD, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Michael McGee, Lal Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Munir Amlani, Mari Nekar, and Marika Kuyechin.